Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Asha Kothari Chaudhary and I'm a professor of English at Guwahati University. We are doing a course on Indian writing in English, and the module that we are going to be looking at now is entitled Indianness at Crossroads, Diaspora, Border and Travel. In this module, what we will do is we will look at the debates of and on Indianness, ongoing by situation of the discourse of identity, of nationalism, cultural difference in the context of the widening territorial range of the nation state and the ensuing fluidity of all these concepts. The distinction between the old and the new Indian diaspora will be discussed. We will also look at the concept of Indianness that has gained a wide circulation in recent years in the context of globalization and the consequent history of migration and displacement. Avtar Bra opines that, quote, the concept of diaspora signals these processes of multi-locationality across geographical, cultural and psychic boundaries, unquote. Now, the problematic of identity politics in a globalized world offers a perspective on the fluidity of constitution of self in a post-colonial world. This module will deal with the politics of representation of home, in-between spaces, and deterritorialized belonging. In Salman Rushdie's Imaginary Homelands, Essays and Criticism, 1981 to 1991, we find him offering a complex negotiation of diasporic identity in terms of feelings of displacement, discontinuity, and rootlessness, living in between different nations. This module is designed to help you to read critically the history of Indian English novel in the context of the experiences of migrancy and living in diaspora, to understand the important socio-cultural events or contexts that are instrumental to the history of diasporic literature, to analyze the complex negotiations between home and host countries, questions of border and margin, time and space. It will also help you to apprehend major texts and to address the transition from roots to roots. Categorizing diasporas. How do you do this? Sudesh Mishra, in From Sugar to Masala, writing about the Indian diaspora, offers an interesting perspective on the question of diasporic identity. Now, although the old diaspora is made up of communities that hail from different provinces, who speak different languages and practice different religions, and who are often inspired to leave home for quite dissimilar reasons, the category is justifiable on the grounds that the earlier or older migration happened in the context of and was determined by colonialism in the heyday of capitalism. For after all, it was CSR, a giant Australian sugar corporation, that initiated the migration of indentured labor to the Fiji Islands. Likewise, under the category of new, we have to include those descendants of the old diaspora who, together with a wave of post-independence emigrants from the subcontinent to sundry metropolitan centers, are the willing subjects of or unwillingly subjected to a post-colonial or transnational political economy. Now, the term Girmit Diaspora refers to the migration of indentured Indian labor to Fiji by European settlers, and the connotation of mutual agreement is invoked by the term. The Indian laborers who were brought to Fiji to work on sugarcane plantations and the writers effectively reproduced the Indo-Fijian indenture experience in their works. C. Prasad Naipaul, a journalist of the Trinidad Guardian, concerned with Girmit or sugar diaspora, involves community feeling and bonding in the collection of short stories originally appearing in 1943 as Gurudeva and Other Indian Tales and revised and republished in 1976 as The Adventures of Gurudeva and Other Stories. His sons Shiva Naipaul and Vidyadhar Suraj Prasad Naipaul continue the tradition. Shiva Naipaul is noted for Fireflies, which comes in 1970, and The Chip Chip Gatherers in 1973, and Beyond the Dragon's Mouth in 1984. He is noted for his sensitive depiction of the plantation colonies. When we begin to focus on Vidyadhar Suraj Prasad Naipaul, perhaps the most famous of the Naipauls, the history of the plantation colonies is vividly represented by this winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2001. Born in Trinidad, Vidyadhar Naipaul went to Britain in 1950 and continues to live there. Grappling with the issues of cultural identity and locational positioning, Naipaul is a polymath for whom both Caribbean and Indian sensibilities open up vistas of creative energy. His perspective on nation, on culture, on border and post-colonial sensibility is expressed in works like The Mystic Monsieur, The Suffrage of Elvira, Miguel Street, A House for Mr. Biswas, The Mimic Men, and a lot of other novels and non-fictional works. Now, the desire to achieve psychocultural recognition and integrity through the activity of house building is recurrent in K.S. Maniam's The Return, which comes in 1981, and in Neil Blasundan's collection of stories Digging Up the Mountains, which comes in 1986. K.S. Maniam, who was born in 1942 as an Indo-Malaysian writer of Tamil background, is the author of The Code, which was written in 1983, and In a Far Country, which comes in 1993, and his fictional world is replete with the descendants of rubber planters who were indentured in Malaysia. Like Naipaul, Subramani, who was born in 1943, explores the themes of alienation, dislocation, against the backdrop of the Girmit Diaspora in the Fantasy Eaters and Other Stories that came in 1988. Cyril Dabedin, David Dabedin, Harold Ladu are some of the other famous Girmit diasporic writers. Let us now look at some non-Girmit diasporas. The writers of the old non-Girmit diaspora, Menon Marath, Santa Ramarao, Balachandran Rajan, and Victor Anand are all born on the subcontinent. Rajan, however, is born in Burma. Now, all of these writers invoke an intimate representation of homeland and the pangs of dislocation and spatial displacement. But their representation is, to some extent, an addressing of the dislocation of communities by colonial history. Now, the most noted of the works are Marath's The Wound of Spring, Santa Ramarao's Home to India, and the two novels by Balachandran Rajan, The Dark Dancer and Too Long in the West. We encounter the problematic dimension of returning home faced by an expatriate. The Revolving Man and the Sacred Cow by Victor Anand, who is an Indian based at Britain, represents the themes of dislocation, homelessness, and the divided self. Sudesh Mishra offers a categorization of an in-between diaspora. There exists another group of writers from the old diaspora who belong neither to the comprador class nor to the Girmit diaspora, but who share some of their preoccupations in relation to the geopolitical context. Now, most of these writers come from the professional or trading diasporas who took advantage of the mobility afforded by colonial rule, now both in this and in the last century, and settled mostly in East or South Africa. They write preeminently about the unenviable middle position held by their community, that is sandwiched between the imperial oppressor on the one hand and the indigenous oppressed on the other, and enamored of neither. In this category, we can include writers like G. Vasanji, who was born in 1950 and is the author of a collection of short stories called Uhuru Street, which comes in 1991, and the novels The Gunny Sack in 1989, No New Land in 1991, The Book of Secrets in 1995. Ahmed Assouf, born in Surat in 1931, and who is noted for two collections of short stories, The Haji and Other Stories of 1978 and Noor Jahan of 1990. He also has two novels, The Visitation, which came in 1980, and The Emperor in 1984. Let us now consider the work of some of the new diaspora. The new diaspora seems to celebrate the poetics of dislocation in terms of a conscious representation of border and the in-between spaces. The themes of complex negotiation with ethnicity, nation-states, gender, and class are all skillfully interwoven in their writings. Ved Mehta's Face-to-Face and autobiography, the filial narratives Dadiji and Mamaji, Vedi Farooq Dondi's Bombay Duck, which comes in 1990, East End at Your Feet in 1976, Come to Makkah and Other Stories in 1978, Pune Company, 1980. All of these are some very important works in this area. We also have to look at Vikram Seth's The Golden Gate, which was written in 1986 as an experimental novel in verse on the model of Alexander Pushkin's Eugene Onegin, which came in 1825 to 1833, which is set in California. The Golden Gate is a narrative in 30 books, and the narrative is made up of sonnets in 4-foot rhymed lines. Pico Iyer, who was born in 1957 in Britain, is the author of Video Nights in Kathmandu, which he wrote in 1988, which was followed by The Lady and the Monk in 1991, and then Falling Off the Map in 1991 again, Cuba and the Night, which came in 1995. All of these novels express the agony of a fragmented identity. The next author that we must not forget is Rohinton Mistry, who was born in 1952 and is noted for novels like A Fine Balance, which came in 1995, Family Matters, and Such a Long Journey that come in 1991, and the short story collection Swimming Lessons and Other Stories from Firozabad in 1987. Rohinton Mistry's works express his unique Parsi sensibility and the notions of home, nation, and identity. And then we come to the works of Salman Rushdie, perhaps one of the most important writers of the 20th and perhaps the 21st century as well. He was born in 1947 to a Muslim family, and Rushdie's works include Grimus, Midnight's Children, Shame, The Moor's Last Sigh, The Satanic Verses, The Ground Beneath Her Feet, Fury, and a number of other works. Rushdie is noted for the use of magic realism and a polyphonic language in his fiction, which is replete with the nuances of the fragment itself, the carnivalesque aura, and a celebration of the marginal position. His perspective on Indianness, for example, is often unique, and Midnight's Children is an epoch-making book in Indian English fiction. The novel narrates the saga of Salim Sinai, born on the midnight of 15th August 1947, his birth and consequent life echoes the birth of the nation, and the political allegory makes it a brilliant work of fiction. Coming to the work of Bharati Mukherjee, we look at her addressing the politics and poetics of fragmented selfhood and her novels that depict the condition of the diasporic subject caught in the web of multiple loyalties. The Tiger's Daughter, Wife, Jasmine, The Middleman and Other Stories, Bombay Duck, etc. are some of her important works. Suniti Namjoshi is noted for her brilliant use of fantasy and surrealism in The Conversations of Cow, in The Mothers of Mayadeep, Saint Suniti and the Dragon. Shon Ramaya's novel, Flute, is set in the days of the Raj. The first novel by Indira Ganeshan, The Journey, involves the picture of a fictional India as a saleable commodity in the West. With Sunetra Gupta, who is actually an epidemiologist by profession and works at the Imperial College London, we find that she is also the author of Memories of Rain, which won the Sahitya Academy Award in 1996. Atima Srivastava and Meera Sayal are settled in Britain, and Srivastava's transmission is about the complex process of adaptation in a new land. Sayal's Anita and Me is narrated by a child in an Indian family in Britain. Meena Alexander's Manhattan Music deals with the lives and problems of Indian immigrants living in America. Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's Sister of My Heart, Kiran Desai's Hullabaloo in the Guava Orchard, Shona Singh Baldwin's What the Body Remembers, Jhumpa Lahiri's The Interpreter of Maladies, The Namesake, The Lowland are some of the other very interesting contemporary works. Let us turn and now look at some non-fictional prose. Sharanjit Chand's In My Own Name is an autobiographical narrative of an Indian wife in England, evidencing the life of deprivation that is piled up when she encounters discrimination as a woman, as a black person or a colored person, and a foreigner. The encounter between India and the West is an important theme in Suniti Namjoshi's Goja, an autobiographical myth. Pico Iyer's travelogues, Video Night in Kathmandu and other reports from the not so far east, The Lady and the Monk, 4 Seasons in Kyoto, and Falling Off the Map, Some Lonely Places of the World, skillfully portray his immediate observation with acute sensitivity to the culture and history of the places he visits. Meena Alexander is the author of 2 books, Fault Lines, a memoir, and The Shock of Arrival, Reflections on Post-Colonial Experience, which integrates poems and prose passages and deals with the themes of migration and memory. Salman Rushdie's Haroon and the Sea of Stories, which comes in 1991, is a children's book. The collection of essays, Imaginary Homelands, written in 1991, is an important landmark in the history and theory of diaspora studies. His collection of short stories is East West, that came in 1994. Once again, V.S. Naipaul's travelogues and other prose writings include The Middle Passage, that comes in 1962, An Area of Darkness, 1964, Mr. Stone and the Knight's Companion, 1963, India, A Wounded Civilization, that comes in 1977, and India, A Million Mutinies Now, the 1990 book. Let us now turn to poetry written by the diasporic writers. The poetry of G.S. Sharat Chandra, Salim Peradina, Agha Shahid Ali, Sujata Bhatt, and Meena Alexander are noteworthy examples of diasporic longing. Conceptualization of home as an imaginative realm of nostalgia and memory appear in the poetry of Sujata Bhatt, known for the collections like Brinizen, Monkey Shadows, and The Stinking Rose, Sujata Bhatt confidently uses Gujarati with English, and her bilingualism contributes to her creativity. Like Bhatt, themes of sexual and maternal instincts, frank descriptions of female experiences of subjugation or exploration of the self distinguishes the poetic world of Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, who is also part of America's literary and cultural scene. Her collections include Point No Point, Leaving Yuva City, Black Candle, poems about women from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and she offers a multifaceted portrait of Indians and Indian immigrants in New Jersey in the context of the exploration of themes of alienation, rootlessness, memory, and nostalgia. Let us look also now at the work of Agha Shahid Ali, who was born in 1949. He is a poet who is acutely conscious of his Muslim faith, his family heritage, and his longing for his homeland, which is Kashmir. Ali seems to offer the most intense experience of dislocation and alienation in his verse. Although he has preferred to live in the USA, his attachment to Kashmir is undeniable and unmistakable. Ali's early verse in Bone Sculpture and in Memory of Begum Akhtar evidences the influence of both Urdu verse and modern poetry. And his poetic idiom is replete with the creative nuances of the effects of dislocation, and his poetry is a celebration of the sublime moment of bliss and longing for Kashmir. Agha Shahid Ali's famous collections include Bone Sculptures, In Memory of Begum Akhtar, A Walk Through the Yellow Pages, The Half-Inch Himalayas, A Nostalgist's Map of America, and The Country Without a Post Office. Coming to the work of Vikram Seth, who was born in 1952, we look at Mappings that comes in 1981, which establishes Seth as a representative poet. Now, it can be read as a creative document of self-scrutiny and soul-searching as expressed in the title Mappings, which literally and symbolically maps his fragmented self. In The Humble Administrator's Garden, which comes in 1985, we find 3 sections, each named after a tree from 3 countries. For example, Watang represents China, Neem represents India, and Live Oak represents the USA. The poems in the section entitled China are influenced by the poet's experience of living in China as a research student. Although descriptive in nature, the poems deal with the dilemma of negotiating with the claims of the home and the host countries. G.S. Sharat Chandra, who was born in 1935 and passed away in 2000, is now also known for collections like Bharatanatyam Dancer and Other Poems of 1968, Reasons for Staying of 1970, April in Naujangarh in 1971, and Once or Twice, 1974, and some other works. Salim Peradina's First Offense and Group Portrait are important works too. Sudeep Sen is another expatriate poet like Vikram Seth. His books include Leaning Against the Lamppost, The Lunar Visitations, New York Times, South African Woodcuts, etc. Sen's setting covers a wide range from India to Italy, America to South Africa, Mathura to Hiroshima. His verse deals with the themes of love, nature, death, politics, and urban life. Next, we are going to look at the work of Hoshang Merchant, who was born in 1947. Merchant lived abroad until his return to India, and much of his work was actually written outside. He also has works that he has written after his return. His work includes Hotel Golconda, which came in 1992, Jonah and the Whale in 1995, The Home, the Friend and the World 1995, Love's Permission 1996, The Heart in Hiding, 1996 again, and The Birdless Cage, which came in 1997. Hoshang Merchant's verse is frank and offers uninhibited representation of homosexual love. Ira Gardner Smith, an Indian Jew married to an American, has produced Curry and Rice in 1994, which is a collection of 99 limericks, and she is another important diasporic poet who we might take into consideration. Uma Parmeshwaran, a renowned critic, is also actively involved in the theatre in Canada, where she teaches. She founded the Performing Arts and Literature of India, or PALI, in Winnipeg, where she also produces a weekly television show. The plays in Sons Must Die and Other Plays, in 1998, are unique explorations of the human relationships. In Sita's Promise, which is a dance drama, Rama and Sita appear only to provide occasion for various types of Indian classical dance manifestations. Parameshwaran's most famous play is Rootless but Green Are the Boulevard Trees. It is a social play with a modern setting and deals with the problems of immigration and immigrants in Canada. So we have looked now at a whole plethora of cross-generic writings that have been coming forth from writers of Indian origin or with roots somehow linked to India, but writers who write from abroad. And therefore the trajectory is diasporic literature. To sum up now, let us go back and recollect what we have talked about. This module must have helped you to read critically the history of Indian English novel in the context of experiences of migrancy and living in a diasporic condition. It must have helped you understand the important socio-cultural events or contexts that are instrumental to the history of literature of the diaspora and the understanding of the notion of what it means to live in exile. We also analyze the complex negotiations between home and host countries, questions of borders and margins, time and space in terms of reading major texts, and also what it means to live in a state of in-betweenness. Thank you.